Welcome, everybody. It's 7:32. I see a quorum here for the North Andover Finance Committee, so I will call our March 13th meeting to order at 7:32. Go.
Now call to order the Thursday, March 13th, 2025 meeting of the North Andover Select Board. 7:33. 7:33.
All right, it is not on the agenda, but I would like to do the Pledge of Allegiance if everybody's amenable. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. The Finance Committee is having a joint meeting tonight with our esteemed colleagues on the Select Board due to some scheduling conflicts. This just worked out that the town manager she was coming in here to meet with us to go over the budget, and the Select Board needed to get the same presentation, so they asked to piggyback, and I said it was okay, so.
And we are
everybody
grateful.
Please be nice.
And we are grateful for that. Thank you.
All right, so that is what's up next on our agenda. So without any motions to the contrary, I would give the floor to you, esteemed town manager and esteemed director of finance.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it kind of looked weird. There we go. Thank you. I appreciate you accommodating us. Obviously, we're on a tighter than usual schedule as we're doing the budget, and this was very helpful. So I tried not to present too much of what you've already seen, and there has been some small changes as we go along, but I'm happy to answer any questions as well. So this, as you know, is the fiscal year 26 revenues. The revenues for the fiscal year 26 budget total $136 million. It's about a 6.74% increase and an $8.6 million increase from last year. We have four major revenue sources, which are property taxes, local receipts, state aid, and transfers. Our property taxes are expected to grow by about 7%. Local receipts grow by about 10%, and local aid, per our policies and procedures, is level funded from the year before. You'll remember that that's due to the scheduling of the state budget, so typically we're well into the next fiscal year before the state authorizes a budget, so that's why we use the year before's numbers. This is just a breakdown of what our revenues look like. As you know, most of our budget is made up from the tax levy, and about 84% of the levy is actually residential. This chart just shows our historical new growth. As you know, Proposition 2.5% allows the town to raise its tax levy by 2.5% of the prior year's levy, plus any new construction, which is considered to be improvements or new buildings. Right now, we do not have any large impact projects on the horizon. Typically, we would see those in the pipeline, so they would already be having conversations with planning or the building commissioner or the assessor, so we would know that they were kind of coming soon. We do continue to anticipate a tight budget for the next few years, and it's important to kind of remember that. We said that last year and the year before too, but we want to make sure that we continue to stress that. You can see that 25, 24, and 23 were really kind of anomalies due to Amazon new growth coming on, and that the rest of the years were more in line with what we typically forecast. We usually use a number about 750 to 850 as typical for new growth. This is the fiscal year 26 new growth details. So you can see that we actually are seeing a little bit better than usual in our estimate. So we're about 1.3 million. Some of that is because we still have Amazon replacements, personal property coming on. So if you remember correctly, the tax incentive agreement does not include personal property. We specifically did that. And what's happening is that Amazon is already replacing things that they built, which is great, and we'll continue to do that. We know only really one new industrial project, which was the extra space storage on Osgood Street. And we had a few small commercial things, nothing too big. And then one apartment building that we're currently thinking is coming on, which is on Main Street at 69,000. This shows our full expenditures broken out and you'll see this document in your budget book as well. You will be getting new budget documents because there's been so many changes. It probably makes more sense for us to just take your books and put new books in rather than try to flip the pages out. What you can see basically is that we have seen kind of some large changes in different places, and I'm going to kind of go over some of what those biggest ones are. The one thing that I will point out that I think is a little bit different than what we usually see is, as you know, we do budget salary reserves for any of our unsettled contracts. In fiscal year 25, we included in that salary reserve the funds for the middle school teachers, which this body and in the tri-board meeting decided to use for just school revenue. So that number looks a little bit weird because that $700,000 was in there, and now we're taking it down to the 91,000, and that's because of that. Yeah. So we typically put in our salary reserve just unsettled contracts.
Right.
Last year, we put in the salary reserve the money for the middle school teachers. Now it's been transferred over to the middle school, to the budget for this education. So it's showing a very kind of substantial decrease in the general government budget, and it's showing that the general government budget is only going up by 0.83, but that's misleading. And so I just wanted to kind of point that out, and I will get into what that actual number is as we move forward.
Thank you.
So the kind of big things are the town departments, excluding that salary reserve we talked about, is going up about 3.46%, about $1.1 million. Based on the budget sent forward by the school committee, the North Andover Public Schools are increasing by 9.89%, approximately $6.1 million. Greater Lawrence Tech is increasing by 59%, $355,000. Essex Tech is increasing by 18%, $84,893, and benefits are increasing by over 9%, $2.2 million, which makes for an exceptionally difficult budget year.
Why is Greater Lawrence so high?
So it's a great question. Last year it was budgeted low and there was transfers made. Their assessment has increased. We do have more students there than we had in the past. Same with Essex Tech. We're just seeing more kids. Like right now at Essex Tech, there's only two seniors out of the 17 kids that are there. So we're just seeing more students heading towards those tech programs.
And sorry, so that's calculated as a cost per head that goes, we pay like an assessment to them?
Yes, so we pay approximately 2% of the Greater Lawrence Tech budget is paid by North Andover based on our population. And then for Essex Tech, we pay per student.
Oh, okay.
Essex Tech has special legislation that allows any student who applies, if they're admitted to go, doesn't matter if they're part of another district or not. The good news is that at the legislative meeting, just was it last week, Greater Lawrence announced that they are going to be doing an agricultural program. And so that will be a huge benefit to us because it's very difficult for us to be able to know what that Essex Tech bill is going to be from year to year.
So are we guaranteed a certain number of seats at Greater Lawrence?
So we have, it was part of the agreement where it's based on population, basically. I think we have only 2% of the students. Essex Tech, no, because we're not part of their regional group.
Wait, sorry, we're paying Greater Lawrence 2% based on North Andover's population. So all of the Merrimack towns or whatever pay a portion? Okay.
Yes. And actually, that regional agreement is about over 50 years old, so it's probably something that at some point should be revisited and looked
That's
at.
regardless of enrollment?
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
I think, though, like historically, we weren't really using all those spots, but I think that
We
that
are
has
now.
changed a lot.
That's what I was just
so-
going to ask,
Yes.
is we are using,
We are.
yeah.
And actually, this is a total sidebar, but right now we have Voc students from both Essex Tech and Greater Lawrence working at DPW as mechanics, electricians, plumbers, and HVAC.
That's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a brand new program, and at the water treatment plant. It's a brand new program that we just started about 3 months ago, and we've seen a lot of success with.
And Melissa, if I could, just on the benefits question, that's essentially, that's a number that's largely out of our control, correct me if I'm wrong, in general increase?
Yeah, so the benefits, what's really pushing the benefits line is the fact that the GIC is going up by about 12%. We have had conversations with other people who either have Blue Cross Blue Shield or have Maya, and they're actually seeing higher than 12%, more like 15%. Retirement's also up by 9%, which is a lot. The GIC has said that they are pledging to take a look at how they can bring those costs down moving forward, because obviously double-digit increases in your health insurance is unsustainable. The problem is, if they do that, then what's going to happen is that we're going to be decreasing benefits for employees. So it's kind of a difficult scale. So they're looking at, different things that they can do to try to control that before they go back out for bid next year.
And forgive me if I should know this already, do we do a program of, a compensation program if someone elects not to take insurance?
We do. We have an opt-out program.
Yeah. Is that further in the presentation?
That's okay. I'm going to flip through it right now. So we do have an opt-out program. This was kind of what we were looking at for insurance in the long run. So we joined the GIC back in 2014. And we definitely saw significant savings when we joined. But post-COVID, it's just not continued in that way. The breakdown's about half schools and the other half is split by municipal employees and retirees. We're actually using 7.5 in these later years, 27, 28, 29, and 30 to do our forecasting. We do have a new opt-out program we rolled out 2 years ago. I'm hoping more. We're actually going in open enrollment on April 1st, and I'm hoping more people decide to join it. If you opt out of our insurance, it's a $6,000 payment for families and a $3,000 payment for if you're an individual. We have 30 employees currently in the program with a forecasted savings a year of $366,000. So it's been successful, and I think as more people are seeing it work, hopefully they'll start to do it. You have to be on our insurance for 2 years to be able to be qualified for it.
Thank you.
And is the GIC still cheaper than doing it on our own, or is that not?
So every time we come up every 3 years, basically with the GIC, and we collect all of our risk data, and we have a broker, cooking company, that we work with who reviews all of our claims. Due to COVID, we were exceptionally high risk last time, and she advised us not to go out. Could that change? Perhaps, so we'll continue to watch that. We do have a aging population in some of our departments, which I think kind of contributes to the cost as well. So we need to kind of think about, how we want to frame it. But we continue every 3 years to pull that data and have it reviewed.
Can I ask that $6,000 and the $3,000 payment for group or individual, is that annually?
It's annual.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a breakdown of the proposed budget expenditures. I know that it says 51% for the schools. I tell you this every year. It's really more like 65% when you go in and pull out the employee benefit, the debt service, and the liability insurance, as well as the shared services that would be for the schools. But this is the way that we show it. In the past, I went back and looked a few budgets back. Really has been hovering around the 46, 47% frame for this, so this is up a little bit based on this new budget. This is our estimated retirement assessment fiscal year 26 through 30. Again, that was a 9% increase this year, unfortunately. This is through fiscal year 36, and then in fiscal year 36, we know we are fully funded and we no longer have to make this payment. This is the health insurance. You've all seen this before. I just wanted to keep it in case people are interested. So this was the residential impact of using the capacity. At the end of this budget, as presented, we would have $1.5 million in levy capacity remaining. This is the same chart that we showed you at the tri-board meeting. So if you remember correctly, the estimated increase on the fiscal year 26 tax bill at that time was 7.5%. Utilizing the levy as we are now, it is 6.1%.
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
Yep. So we showed you this slide at the last meeting, and it basically showed you that the impact of the fiscal year 26 budget, if we used all the levy capacity, would be 7.5%. Now that we're using the $68.2 million number, and we know that we're leaving, or we expect that we're leaving $1.5 million in levy capacity, this is now 6.1%. So what the average person could do is take their tax bill from this year and in a vacuum, put 6.1% on it, assuming the value doesn't change, and figure out what the impact of this fiscal year 26 budget would be on their tax bill.
Perfect, thank you. And just for the public following along, that's the average property value in North Andover and the average tax bill.
Yes.
Is there on that, yeah, okay.
So we did it for the average with
Got
fiscal
it.
year 25 average, which is 825. And then Dennis also did it for 100,000, 300,000, 500,000. So if you know your at 825, you could easily take the 825 and the 100,000 and start adding on, or you could just multiply by the 6.1.
Perfect, thank you.
Can I ask you a question? What's the typical average amongst different towns and cities as far as for
For a tax bill?
tax bill, yeah?
Let me see if I have that in my presentation, hold on. I have a lot of extra slides in the back.
If not, don't worry, I was just curious.
No, it's an easy enough answer to get you if I don't have it attached, but I was telling Brian today about how the Division of Local Services has this very handy new database that you can run all kinds of metrics on. So I do. This is slide 55.
We know what Brian's doing tonight.
Yep.
So I spent my afternoon.
Okay.
Did you ask for surrounding towns or comparable towns?
So these are our comps that we use for everything. So when we're negotiating contracts, when we're doing any type of analysis for the budget, these are the comps that we use. We had these comps created about 4 years ago as part of a salary analysis that we were doing for all employees when I first started. And basically what they did is they compare things like population, equalized value, home value, all sorts of other measures. If you're interested in the actual metrics that we use, I'm happy to share that with you. But this is basically a breakdown. So you can see that North Andover's, and it would be helpful if I had numbers on hand, but this is North Andover's here,
Sort of in the upper,
sort of in the upper.
yeah.
Third.
I think the list is just residential.
We're coming in third on this list.
Years ago for town meeting, because I had produced a document that took assessed value with similar towns. I figure let's, get someone who's impartial. So if their house was assessed back then especially, would be, say, like 500,000, and then compared the tax bill for them and for us, and it was really enlightening.
It is interesting.
So, and again, the 500,000, which I'm just using as an example right now, it's sort of equalizing when you have someone who's a trained professional to do assessed values, and then just see what their tax bill is like, and what ours is like. And it was pretty enlightening.
Very interesting. And we do,
I'm more than happy to try to do it again for you, except there's just not a lot of property selling.
that's the hard part, finding comps.
And there's this fever pitch where, they're going to overbid like crazy, which they do.
Rosemary, what was enlightening about it?
It was, at that time, we were quite low.
Okay.
I don't know where it would land right now, but
Yeah.
I've done it a couple of times.
Yeah.
And
In
it's
value
just
or tax rate?
your tax
Tax
bill.
rate was, okay.
Because there's,
Yeah.
they work together, but not in the way that people at home might think that they do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
And what do you think of it? I mean, being a home seller, so what do you think of that measure?
Yeah, it's gonna, you could, I was wondering the same thing, because you could have equal assessed values, but, the tax rate's gonna, is gonna make a difference,
Is
on-
to the people
As
who-
far as, what they're paying, what
What
the
they're
average
paying.
taxpayer's paying, so. But it would be interesting to see.
It
just
is
the
interesting.
breakdowns.
It didn't take too long to go through it. You just go through MLS and get it done.
Okay,
But
so-
but some communities include more things in their taxes than ours might, or vice
Or less,
versa.
yeah.
Yeah, so you have to kind of figure that out as well.
Yeah, things you don't know is, do other communities have more debt exclusions? Like, there's a
Right.
lot of different things that could contribute to the bill.
Right.
That chart that I just showed you, that actually is from that DLS data bank. So the good thing about that is they use 2024 because it's the last actual year you've had. And make sure that they're comparing the same things, which is helpful.
So they kind of normalize it.
Yeah, so they used our fiscal year ~25 data.
They use
Or
fiscal year,
everybody's.
everyone's same fiscal year '24 because
Oh,
the year is,
24, sorry, I
the year is
misheard.
completed.
Yep,
No, because it's
perfect.
an actual year that we've completed.
Yeah, yep.
So that chart is more equalized than just looking at assessed values and the tax rate.
Yes.
Right.
And so the reason that the chair and I have been talking about this is because we've been creating all these other charts that are really interesting, and we're going to present at our next meeting with you, that talk about our per capita spending compared to our comps, and, you know, just so people have a kind of an understanding of where we're spending our money.
Can I make a request that you come do that for us as
Absolutely.
well?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
So jump to our next meeting.
Oh,
Absolutely. Yeah, so Nicole, your admin,
Yeah.
and our admin, did put this all together for us over the last couple of days, and it's been really helpful.
She's great, by the way.
She is
I just would like to
fabulous.
say this publicly. She is fantastic.
Yes, we're very lucky. She's great. She got a whole new, she's so good at her job, we just keep adding things. Now she's in charge of the building. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So this is a chart just showing our town employees over the years. So you see the jump from 2021 to 2022. That's when we brought on the 4 firefighters, 4 police officers, and the 911 dispatchers. And then again, from 2023 to 2024 is where you see our increase, where we brought on the tradespeople.
Oh, so this is just municipal, not.
Just municipal.
And,
Yep.
and Melissa, just to go back on that, I know you've said that's, in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, you've said that that's had a very positive impact on the budget. Is that still true?
So they're all fairly new. They've all started over the last like 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
I have heard so many positive things about the 3 of them being here. It's really been great. And so them combined with Jeremy and Steve, both for the with John Mullen at the schools, they've been doing way more things in-house. They've gotten to really get to know our systems. So for instance, we would always have to call them to work on call outside sources to work on even the new boiler at the Stevens estate. The new plumber figured it out immediately, and we haven't had to have any additional calls for service. We needed a plug in here because hilariously the kitchen came with only 1 plug. The electrician came in, installed all the plugs, something that would have cost us around $12,000. So we're
Good.
definitely seeing that work out.
Good.
It's been really positive. And like I said, now we have the co-ops too. So, you know, the hope is, like the one at the mechanic, we've had an open assistant mechanic position forever. And so the hope is that we'll kind of transition those people into the positions that we have
That'd be
open.
great.
Because it's a tough workforce to fill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's
And
great
helping
for
local
everybody.
folks too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That's
awesome.
great.
so. Okay, so we're just gonna go through kind of the highlights and changes from fiscal year 25 to fiscal year 26. As you see, there's no staffing increases at all. This is the 5th year of the Finance Committee Reserve, and we are committed to continuing to fund that at the $1.5 million. We do have a salary reserve for our unsettled collective bargaining agreements. We have 3 agreements that we are entering into negotiations with right now. So coming up on July 1st is 911 dispatchers, clerical, library, and DPW. So those
Okay.
are the 4 that we'll be starting negotiations with. We have all of our cost of living increases budgeted at 3%. Once we set a pattern with one group, we use that for all the other groups as well. We have the $1 million in budget for capital, which we'll use for the debt towards the Facilities Master Plan 2 projects in the very near future. And then these are the reductions and eliminations that we made in order to get our budget within the capacity number. So we will only have 1 hazardous waste day instead of 2. That's unfortunate. The only good thing is that over the last couple of years, we've entered into an agreement with our surrounding communities that they can use our hazardous waste day and we can use their hazardous waste day. So goes a long way. So we'll make sure we get that information out to people because we really don't want people hoarding their hazardous waste for an entire year. That's not great. Some of these changes are small, right? We took $4,200 from the town manager's office, $1,200 from finance, $9,000 from the audit. The assessor had a denial of a position upgrade. The treasurers, we cut some money from postage and moved, actually expense that should have been in water sewer to water sewer. We made some cuts in legal services, trying to do more in-house, which is working. Human resources, we made some cuts. IT, what you will see is that Mike Grant, who is the information technology director for the schools, his salary has been moved over into the schools budget. So we were kind of struggling with this one. All of the other IT employees at the schools fall under the town, and we hire them, and they fall under our our salary charts. Mike Grant did not, so they were negotiating different increases for him that we were not aware of, so we decided that it made more sense to kind of split those out. So he's over there now.
Melissa, quick question. Are these
Yeah.
centralized, or each department has their own IT staff?
They're centralized, a shared service amongst the entire town.
Got it.
The town clerk, what you're seeing here basically is that we cut funding for elections is basically, so a lot of the time what will happen is we'll try to keep, even though it's not a presidential election, we'll try to keep things pretty level because a presidential election is a lot more expensive and to have those ups and downs in the budget is hard. We just couldn't do it. So we cut the election funding for the presidential from the town clerk and for the postage in the treasurer's office. PD, we cut $35,000 from overtime, $8,000 from materials and supplies, and $1,500 from print forms. We're moving $50,000 over to the capital budget, so we'll be telling you about that at our next meeting, and there's just, it's a small change that we want you to know. The fire department, we had 2 captain positions that we were proposing that will not be able to do, and so we reduced their budget. The emergency management department, we cut by $10,711. DPW brought in a budget that was below the guidance, made it really hard for us, but I was very impressed.
Department now?
Yeah, I was like, I mean, honestly, they must have put so much work into getting it where they needed it to be.
Efficiencies, yeah.
It was so impressive. So we took $20,000 from their gas. But I was so impressed when they came in, because we had trash
So
increases.
that's how you were awarded it, huh?
Right? I mean,
So we cut more.
yeah, so, I mean, it was just so impressive. We had a lot of increases there, and they really just were smart about how they requested things and what they did, so it was very impressive. Facilities, we didn't cut $313,000, but we did. So Steve had asked for $313,000 additional. We're still able to put his budget up by the amount that he needs, but we're hopeful that this 313 are all things we'll be doing in-house now, so that's a positive. Veterans, we did cut $50,000, and I don't want anyone to panic. This is based entirely on historical information on what we've paid out for benefits. The important thing about veterans benefits is to remember 75% of it is reimbursed by the state. So if for some reason we do spend $50,000 more, we only need to come up with 15. And so that's why we went that direction. And then the Stevens Library had put in our request for bookmobile staff, and that was denied.
Melissa, before. Go ahead, Lucas.
Do you have a total
It's about 1.3.
for all of the eliminations?
Mhm.
Thank you.
I was going to make a comment, first of all. Thank you so much to the town departments for these cuts. I mean, this is really taking one for the team, I feel strongly. And I really appreciate all of them coming up with these cuts and working with you to get here. I have a question about just the impact specifically to public safety on the police and fire cuts. I mean, is there a concern, over time, I appreciate trying to manage it, certainly, but I just, what's the impact, I guess, of that? And as well, not having captains in the fire department, I mean,
We have long-term
that's not
plans.
ideal, obviously,
Right,
so
it's
I guess
not.
it just, if you have any kind of thoughts on the impact of those and.
So I'm sure you remember that probably 3 years ago, I asked the police department, the fire department, and DPW to put together their 5-year plans on what they wanted to see in their departments. And those plans include captains in the fire department. It included having the shift lieutenants for the ladder truck, and it included kind of moving to either a captain or like a deputy chief type position in the police department. Unfortunately, under our current metric, it's just not a possibility. It's something that if we were going to talk about the potential of an override in a future year, that's where my goals would be. We have been able to make some improvements there. I mean, we were able to do the 9 employees, and at DPW, we were able to do the tree climber this year, which has been huge. And we're still trying to hire, so if anyone knows a tree climber. And then we were able to make some improvements in water sewer, which was really where we had the needs. But in the long term, if we want to have the best operational department, we're going to need to fund these positions.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Can I have a physical? Sorry, just to follow up on that, is the one thing when I came to this meeting, one thing I had in mind is like, for all the, it's so much information about the schools, et cetera. And, this is really interesting to me because obviously there's a lot of the rest of the town. And so just personally, what do you think what are the areas that you are most concerned about that you think are most vulnerable going forward? Is it those positions that you just mentioned? I mean, like, if you're just like, oh, we're doing this, but it makes you anxious. Where along those lines do you feel vulnerable?
So I think operationally, we know that we would operate better if we had more command staff at our public safety, without any question. The kind of things that keep us up at night are probably more, and here's what I will say. The lieutenants that we have, the deputy chief we have at the fire department, and the 2 chiefs we have work exceptionally hard in difficult circumstances. Like, we are not top heavy at all, which is something you hear about in a lot of different communities. Having an administrator on all the time, especially at the fire department, would be ideal. And so we continue to try to move toward that. The kind of things I think that are a little daunting are like, so we cut $9,500 from special town meeting. So if there's a special town meeting, right, we're going to be a little bit behind the 8 ball because that's typically someplace where we would have had and been prepared for it, right? So things like that are kind of the things that I think are a little bit nerve-wracking. I hate cutting training because we need it, right? So I try not to cut training from public safety at all. And we've been really creative with using our Maya grants, which is our liability insurance, to do DPW trainings, that we're making sure we're doing driving training. A lot of our DPW employees have recently gotten their CDLs through a process that we funded, which has been amazing. We were able to move people up from laborer to heavy equipment operator through that program, and I don't want to lose things like that, right? So we're trying to be really creative about how we do those things. But there's other things that we're going to need to do training for instance, right, AI is something that we're talking about. People are using it, and we haven't done any training yet. And so knowing that we're making cuts from some of these things can be a little bit scary because I still want to open us up to any liabilities.
And traditionally, I just follow this. DPW is always the ones that seem to have gotten the short end of the stick. It is incredibly impressive that they came for what you just said about their budget, and props to them. But I always think that there's a place. I mean, just they never seem to get the ice cream at the end of the dinner.
No, and we know that for trash, our trash contract's coming up. We know that our trash is going to be more expensive because it's just more expensive right now for trash. And then when our fixed costs, I mean, we joke that Proposition 2.5 limits the amount we can raise our budget. Somebody needs to limit the fixed costs because when your fixed costs are going up by 9.5% and you're saying we can only go up by 2.5, something's got to give. That's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, just one more thing. Then I'll pass the microphone. Maybe this is what you were alluding to, having earlier for the select board, but it would be great to know what comparable communities spend on public safety, and because we're always talking about our cost per pupil, it would be nice to have the comparable for the public safety departments as well.
So we have all that, and I'm happy to come and present it to you. What you're going to find is that we are below the average on
I figured we were
all government spending.
significantly.
Yeah, I mean, we have another meeting on the 18th. I don't know if you or Dennis are available for that, but we'd love to have you come back and talk about that and whatever you talk about at the select board meeting. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to.
Okay.
All right, sorry,
So now it's
yes,
Keith's
thank you.
turn. Oh, wait, one more thing.
Okay, it's like being at my house. I would love for this to be not to be a standing document, but something that we are referring back to, right? Because I feel like we can. And I would love for each time that you come present to the Finance Committee, if we can have this document, that we can show that we have found additional efficiencies as you guys have kind of gone through this process and throughout the year. So respectfully, if we can have this document presented when you guys come to the Finance Committee, I think we would all enjoy seeing what efficiencies we found.
So maybe what I can do is I can kind of take the last couple of years of every year I pretty much have a highlights and changes slide. Maybe I could take a couple of years of those and kind of form them into a document so that you have them.
But to be clear, I want to see what we're doing moving forward.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the historical data I think is important, but from this point forward, obviously we have a different perspective now. I think everybody's focused on where we can find efficiencies. And I think now is our time to continue to kind of push the narrative. So if we can have this document
Sure,
and continue to present it as we're kind of going through the fiscal year, I suspect that we continue to see more efficiencies as we kind of continue throughout the fiscal year.
I'm happy to do that.
But let's clarify what's an efficiency versus what's a cut. We're
Thank
just
you.
cutting to get money because we have to spend money somewhere else to not fire people. I mean, I definitely think we should get updates regularly, from the town and the schools if they're able to more efficiently, leverage money or find savings or whatever. That's great to get updates on. But I don't think this is all just, hey, we found a way to do something more efficient by consolidating postage or something. We're not hiring people on this side so that we can fund something over here, but we still need those people. We're just not doing it. We're cutting it for now. Right? I mean, that's how I'm interpreting
these
a
are
lot of
cuts.
these things.
These are unfortunate cuts, basically.
Yeah, thank you.
Still appreciate your point. Yes, let's get those updates, but I just,
That's the same point I would make. We can run the fire department more efficiently without captains, but in an ideal world, we'd rather have them to
Yes.
operate better and better serve the public. So, and I guess as I'm looking at this, and again, reiterate the thanks to all of the town departments for the belt tightening that we've all had to do here. I guess I'm looking specifically at public safety, and when we set our goals out for the fiscal year, right, we made some of those decisions, some of those recommendations in a vacuum, not necessarily anticipating some of this. Is that something that it would be helpful to you if we were, as a group, to revisit some of those goals and say, had we known X, Y, or Z would be now on the table, would we make different choices? I've got a couple of those going in my head now where I think we've said we want to reinvest in roadways or whatever it might be and increase the budget for roadways, which you may have just left that flat. But I don't know if I knew that came at the expense of a position, a public safety position. So, and I don't know if that's the case or if I would understand that.
But
So-
couldn't one argue, I'm not suggesting that I'm going to argue this, but couldn't one argue that if we had known what we know now about the needs of the schools, you wouldn't necessarily have made those decisions?
Correct. I mean,
Right.
if we'd known now what we knew, if we'd known then what we know now, we wouldn't have necessarily made. I don't know that. We can't necessarily say for sure.
No, and
but
that's why I'm saying, one could make that argument. I mean, I think one could make the argument that all of these things would not be reductions or eliminations had we known that the schools, had we known then what we know now with regard to the school budgets. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, so I don't think it ever hurts to look backwards
No, of
when you're going
course.
forward, right? So I think that it does help us to review the goals. We're at a point where we have to come to a consensus on a budget and start moving it forward.
Yep.
But I think it does help to look back and be like, were we realistic of what we thought we could do this year?
for sure.
Because I don't think any of us anticipated that we'd end up kind of where we are.
I guess that was my
Yeah.
point. We couldn't.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. I think we're saying the same
you're
thing.
right.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, now we're obviously under a truncated timeline. Are we too far into it to make some of those decisions at this point now? I don't know if we are or if we aren't.
I mean, I think we're on the road.
Yep.
But I don't think it hurts to look back and even make amendments, and say like we made these amendments on these dates, knowing that the following things happened. We may not have been able to accomplish everything that were in your goals because
Anyway,
of the
yeah.
circumstances
Yeah,
that
the
we
goals
had.
aren't a hard
Yeah.
and fast thing anyway. A
fluid.
lot of them, take many, many years to accomplish, so.
Right,
Sorry.
right.
Sure,
Yeah,
what-
I'm-
It's like it's guidance, it's not.
Right, I guess, and then maybe I'll ask a clarifying question then. Some of our goals, did you treat some of them in the budget as sacrosanct and don't touch them?
I mean, so when you set a goal, we do our best to try to move them forward.
Okay.
A lot of the time, that may mean that we're applying for grants, so it's not always a direct general fund kind of thing.
Okay.
So, it might be an earmark, it might be a grant. We might say, oh, this is perfect for MassWorks.
Or it might be capital, right?
Yeah, it might be
Okay.
capital. And
Okay.
so, there is no goal from this year that was like, we need to hire one new person in the assessing department, right? That didn't happen. And there isn't usually, I think the last time I remember there being maybe 2 years ago, we had one that was about DPW, and I think it was Selectwoman Smedley's goal, if I remember correctly, looking at DPW and making sure we had the resources we need. So that was the last time I think we had a goal that was really like people-centric.
And a lot of times it comes to you guys to explore this and, just to kind of get the ball rolling.
Right.
Sorry, before we move off this page, I just have one more thing. Having sat on the select board before, I feel like I sometimes have to like remind myself what is my role as a finance committee member versus a select board member. So I try to always remind myself. And so I guess my question as a finance committee member is how risky, I want to try and assess the risk associated with the budget that I'm recommending or not. And, what's the soundness of the budget? So whether or not we have the right, budget allocated for public safety, maybe I think that's a select board concern. They set the policy for how they want to use the money. But I guess my question is around then maybe some of the other things like not having money to do a special town meeting. That's risky. Not having money, cutting mileage or gas money off, maybe we can't do some, something related to an emergency that we need to be able to do, or maybe I missed what, I guess that's an emergency management, $10,000 cut. Like, I don't know what you'd be cutting out of emergency management, but like if we have an emergency, we need money for it. So what's your feeling about the risk associated, financial risk, I guess, associated with these cuts?
So the budget is sound and it's within capacity. Okay, so that part's important, right? We're handing you a budget that is within the capacity that we have. The majority of these things that we cut, we went back and looked at 5 years of analysis. Well, services that were cut, like so the reduction in hazardous waste day, postage, that kind of thing, we did a full analysis of every single thing to make sure that we could do this. Some of them are riskier than others because we know they have to come back, right? That part is painful. So when we know that we're cutting money for elections, and that it impacts 3 different budgets, right? We know that in 3 years, we have to find that money again. So that part hurts a little bit. But we have the Finance Committee Reserve, and that's why we have that, right? So we don't want to go into a budget process saying we know we need to go into the Finance Committee Reserve. We don't want to underfund something knowing that we need it. But in the off chance that a special town meeting is called,
that's what you would be turning to.
Yes.
Okay, very good. I would love to have that answer. That's great. That's what that's there for. But let's everyone keep that in our minds when we talk about the fact that we have that money for other things.
Having those funds and keeping it budgeted at the $1.5 million. There's been years where we haven't had to use it, and that's been great. There's been other years where we've had to use all of it, right? And so
Last year.
last year. I mean, what I think, and sometimes we use it for things that we just didn't know. So for instance, we got an earmark for a pickup truck that one year, right, for the fire department. We were able to come to you. We wouldn't have been able to buy that pickup truck because we didn't have an appropriation for it.
Right.
But we were able to come to you and get it. We were able to buy the furniture for the senior center earlier than the Amazon money came in to purchase it. So it's been really beneficial. And I think the reason why it's I think so good of a process is that it's very transparent. And so it's not us just moving money around. We're coming to you with an application. We're explaining why we need it. And there's this due process when we use it.
Yes, I love that answer. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the same chart, close to the same chart you saw at the last meeting. What we ended up doing was we kind of took the same average single-family home on Salem Street that we've been following for a while now. And we actually do this also. I do it also with commercial. We do it also with office space, so that we know what the impact of different things that we do it. Today I'm only showing you the single-family, but if you're curious, I'm happy to bring the other ones as well. So what we did here basically is that fiscal year 26, you're seeing that 6.1% increase, right, due to bringing that capacity on. Then in fiscal year 27, we're adding the rest of the capacity because we're assuming that we're going to be needing that to offset the cost of living increases bargained for in the school contracts, along with 2.5% as normal, and then also the debt exclusion for the Kittredge School, which we've calculated being around $267,000 a year based on what we know now. So that basically is showing you what the tax bill would look like. So the fiscal year 26 tax bill would be $9,874 if nothing changes and this house on Salem Street stays at the same value. 27, that's when you see a little bit even more of a jump because we'd have the debt exclusion going on, so that's the 10,526. 28 is a regular 2.5%, but in 28, additionally, $50 comes off because it starts to shift back to Amazon. So that's what we're kind of trying to show that transition.
Did anyone do the quick percentage math on this?
It did not.
Because we know it's 6.1%, right? for the-
6.1 for 26,
And
yeah.
it looks linearly.
27, what did we say it was? Do you remember? We did have a whole conversation about it.
About 5.
About
I could
five.
get a calculator right now.
Yeah, like 4.5 to 5 would be the next.
Okay.
And obviously that doesn't include any potential overrides.
It does not include any potential overrides, and it assumes the value is
Right,
steady.
of course.
Right, it's a steady value. Yep.
But it includes the debt exclusion.
It includes what we anticipate the debt exclusion will cost, and we've calculated that based on 25 years with our AAA bond rating at about 4%.
Okay.
Interest rate. Okay, so then that takes us to the sewer enterprise fund. Basically, the sewer enterprise fund is actually going to be increasing only by about $20,000. The reason for that is that typically we have used retained earnings to pay for capital, but all of the projects that we have in sewer this year, we're actually going to be asking for a debt for because they're larger projects than we typically do. So it looks like the budget's, not a huge increase, but it's because we're pulling that. So that's about $200,000 difference there. If you remember correctly, as part of the capital improvement plan, we are doing a sewer and water enterprise fund rate study, so we can make a determination on whether or not eventually we may need to look at the rates. It's been about 11 years since there's been an increase in them. We have $5.8 million in retained earnings in the sewer enterprise fund. So retained earnings is basically the free cash of an enterprise fund. And then this is the water, and the water has about $3.7 million in retained earnings, and this budget's actually going down because we had, again, we transferred almost $1 million to debt to capital last year, and we're not doing that this year. And I actually just thought of another change that I wanted to tell you about as I was sitting here. So one other thing that we are doing is that we have made a decision to no longer charge for the Stevens Pond beach pass. Yes, so every year that I've been here, we have had to lovingly hand everyone their money back because we've had to close for more than half of the year because of the blue algae. We've made a lot of improvements in that situation. One, we did install the aerators, which have been great. Two, we're actually doing all the testing in-house now. So we used to have to bring all of our water to Andover to test. Sometimes that would mean going to Andover every single day and paying them to test. We're now testing, our water technicians got certified, and we're testing in-house. In my last conversation with them, we're actually going to be having other communities pay us to test their water. So that's going to be great.
It's nice for
Yeah. But it
Like
just...
Andover?
Like Andover. Give it back to us. But what was basically happening was that it cost about $40,000 a year to run the pond, and we were only bringing in about 20,000, and then we were ending up giving back 10, and the amount of logistical work just didn't make sense. So we're still going to be selling passes, and giving out stickers. You still have to be a resident to come. So the process is all going to stay the same. We're just not going to be collecting funds for it anymore.
So just day passes only then?
No, you can get a season's pass, and we'll encourage people to do that as it comes forward. And you'll still get a sticker, but we will not be charging for them.
And they'll still have lessons.
So we're working on the swimming lessons now. We've met with the YMCA to see if they'd be willing to do our swim lessons in the pond with us, because the issue is with the swim lessons that we start, and then again, we have to cancel. So we get the poor kids in the water, they're all excited, and then we're like, you can't come tomorrow. So we were hoping that if we partnered with the Y on the days that they couldn't swim in the pond, they could go over to the Y and still be able to have their swim lessons. Because based on the instructors, they've said that it's difficult to teach kids when you've got those gaps in the education of swimming. So we're working on that right now. I'm hoping that's going to come to fruition. If not, we'll figure out something else. The other kind of nice thing is that we're actually able to, if we end up going with the Y, we're able to reduce the number of lifeguards that we need, because we have to have lifeguards who do the swim lessons and also be on the beach at the same time. So it's twice as many lifeguards. So I've learned a lot about the beach over the last like 3 weeks. And we also have a plan for dogs for the geese, which is going to be a huge help because that's what's causing a lot of the water issues. So I just wanted, I thought of that. It's exciting. I just wanted to fill you in on that.
Can I ask you a quick question again?
Yeah, which one?
Just, I don't know the historical information for this. So when I'm looking at the sewer enterprise funds, and I'm looking at the salaries, between the actual for '24 and the appropriated for '25, it's a much larger jump.
We had a lot of vacancies.
Is that what it was?
Yes, so our actuals were very low because they're very difficult positions to fill. We've had a number of employees, both at DPW and at the water and sewer treatment plants, who have gotten licensed, which is huge. It's a very difficult test.
Yeah.
So what happens is that we end up with vacancies for a long period of time, and that's why you're seeing the low actuals.
No, I was wondering the jump between, say, the 428 and the 501, and then the next year is just 518, so it's very narrow. And even on the water enterprise fund, the percentage is very small, so I just didn't understand
It's because their contract's up, so their salaries are budgeted in the salary reserve.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is just a kind of list of the current reserves that we have. So in the stabilization account, which, as you know, is supposed to be the town's rainy day fund you use for emergencies, we have a policy that we keep 5% of the general fund spending from the year before, which is the general policy in most communities. And that's at $6.5 million. We have the capital stabilization fund at 8.7. You remember correctly that the few years that we had Amazon paying the full tax bill before they got their occupancy permits, we were putting money into this capital stabilization fund to save for bigger capital projects. The thought process was we didn't want to have to bond for design when we could help it. We do have an article this year to use $3.6 million of that capital stabilization fund for the high school fields project. Our special education stabilization fund is at $63,678. It still says estimated free cash. It's not estimated anymore. It's true. We have $9.7 million in free cash, and our OPEB trust has $6.6 million. And for those of you that don't know, our OPEB trust basically is to hold money for any unfunded liabilities we have as employees retire. So this is just a chart showing, and I know we haven't seen the warrant yet, but kind of what we are looking at on the warrant for free cash use. So it was certified at the 9.7. We every year make an OPEB transfer for $75,000, and then if you have a new employee in your budget, you are supposed to include $11,000 for that employee. Not a problem this year. We have $6.4 million in free cash for different capital items. We currently have a warrant article for $1.7 million for the school's fiscal year 25 deficit. So what you'll see is a warrant article actually moving money into the fiscal year 25 budget. We will have, I anticipate, fire retro. So the way that works is that, as you know, we create these salary reserves, but if a contract is not settled during that fiscal year, that salary reserve goes away, and I'm unable to use it to pay for a future contract. So I just want to make sure that, I want to make sure we had a warrant article that would address any retro that we may owe, because that's a liability that we will have. And unfortunately, I'm sure you may have seen today that we had come to an agreement with the fire department, and they voted no on the contract, so that moves us towards the Joint Labor Management Committee's arbitration. So likely we will need this article. Snow and ice, we are unfortunately deficit spending in snow and ice. Right now, we are deficit spending by around $600,000? $700,000. So as you know, under the Municipal Modernization Act, I do a letter, which I believe I sent to all of you as well, that says that we're deficit spending. Snow and ice is the only place we're allowed to deficit spend. Typically, we would go to the Finance Committee reserve or something like this. The interesting thing about snow and ice is that once you increase your snow and ice budget, you can never go back down. So most communities try to keep their snow and ice budget very level. So if you go to 1.1 million and all of a sudden you decide you're going to start using pickle brine and it only costs $700,000, you can't reduce the $700,000. So we've kept that budget steady at $1 million. And there's been years where we haven't even needed it all. This year was a little different, and we this is kind of a belt and suspenders type of thing. The hope is to come to you for the Finance Committee Reserve, but we also wanted to have an article on which we can withdraw if we don't need. Stabilization, again, that's $100,000 being transferred, and then capital stabilization, $50,000, which would leave about $3 million in free cash moving into fiscal year '26. So as I'm sure you remember, what happens is that your free cash goes away on June 30th, and then it gets recertified, and basically anything that's unspent from the year before is carried over, along with any of your unspent budget, which I don't anticipate we will have any, as well as any estimates for revenues that may have been short. So we'll always generate free cash because of the way we budget for our state aid, right? So we know we're level funding state aid, which automatically generates some free cash. The guideline is to generate between 5% and 7% a year. What's important to remember is that we're carrying this 3, right? So this 3 should not be included in what we're generating. Okay.
Melissa, if I ask a quick question on the capital allocation from free cash. I was trying to find my notes. I think I had, is 1.9 million of that going towards school capital projects?
Yes.
Do you recall, that's the right number?
It's about that. That doesn't include the 3.6 from the capital stabilization.
Right, okay.
What's great is that this year, Pam and her team did a very comprehensive capital analysis of all of their buildings. Very impressive. What's not great is that, now we have all these expenses that we need to add on. But it's good to know because a lot of it is preventative.
Was that a lot of deferred maintenance?
There's a lot of deferred maintenance,
Okay.
yes.
So, and I know you're not the schools, right? So, but that's something they had not done for quite some time, as I understand it?
So my understanding is that there was not building walkthroughs with every building
Right.
principal before this year. And so she did building walkthroughs with facilities, and every building principal did an analysis of what their needs are going to be and put forward a very comprehensive request that touches all of the schools and deals with a lot of kind of interesting issues. So like, for instance, this year in the capital, one of the things that we're looking at is a study of the modulars, because we're going to have to demolish those, right? But we don't know how much it's going to cost to demolish them. So we have the study of those kind of weird things that have just been kind of sitting out there that need to be dealt with. And so we're working that through. Additionally, we had the curriculum request too. So a little bit unorthodox, but something that was really important to the school department, as you know from when we did our presentation, and so that's included in the capital.
Yeah, thanks. And the superintendent's going to come to our meeting next week as well, so we can
Okay.
talk to her more about that. Thanks.
Can we stay on deferred maintenance for a second?
Yeah.
Melissa, in the capital roadway plan, there's $7.2 million that we've set aside to address roadways by way of mill overlay and then some reclaims. I don't see and I know we had talked about this last time, but I don't see any preventative maintenance in here. Sorry, it's in the budget on page 119 and 120 in your bigger book.
So we have preventative maintenance like seal coating and other items like that
Crack
in our regular operating budget,
Okay.
according to the DPW director. Were you ever able to connect with him?
I never heard from him now.
All right, so let's reopen that.
Okay.
But yes, so that's all, I did ask him, and that is all built into his operating budget under the roadways section.
Okay, so I don't
Sidewalks and
see it when I
roadways.
drive the roadways themselves, and unfortunately, it's all I can see.
Yeah,
So-
I get it, I know. I totally understand. So yes, they are doing
It's a heavy
preventative
bear.
maintenance.
Yeah, I bet.
I think what has been kind of difficult is that the last 5 years, so much of the emphasis on our roadways have been rightfully on the Columbia Gas restoration areas. And now we're trying to kind of implement these improvements throughout town. We did a new pavement management plan,
Okay.
which has been great. We did a regrading of all of the streets. We're only putting out, at this time, 2 years in a row, because what we have found is that things are coming back so pricey that, it's not accurate. And so once you tell someone you're coming to do their street, they want you there. So that's been difficult. But I will reconnect you both so that
I
you
appreciate
can
it.
get together and talk shop about that for
Okay.
sure.
Thank you.
We'd like to be able to look at other things when you're driving around.
would.
And it's hard. I mean, this is pothole season, as we all know, as soon as the melt starts. Okay, and that is the presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, I will check my calendar when I get back to my phone, but I don't think I have anything on the 18th.
Okay, thanks. We'll be in the school building. Yeah, so, with your indulgence, Mr. Chair.
It's your meeting.
Does anybody have any further questions? I know we asked a lot of questions along the way, but anything more that you want to drill down on other than maintenance care of the roads?
Really?
I'm sorry, oh, I didn't even
I'll
realize
never
you were
bring it up
sorry.
again.
All right, I think we're good.
I'll ask the same of the select board if anyone has any additional questions for the town manager or finance director. There's a lot to cover, and we've been looking at a lot of numbers for several weeks now, and we appreciate everyone's really hard work, and we know there's been a lot of moving targets around this. So we tried to get to something that works for everybody. So certainly appreciative of all those efforts and the collaborative nature of both your departments and with the school department.
So direction-wise, are we thinking that we should create a budget book based on the $68.2 million number so that you have a book?
So I was actually just going to ask that. So, thank you. This is, everything you talked about and presented tonight is based upon that number, right? Okay. I think so.
Okay. All right, so.
So I think we would be amenable to that, yeah.
Okay, so we will work on that. And then, just for the people at home, we do have a lot of budget discussions still coming up. So we have your public hearing,
Right.
which is scheduled for March.
So we have a hearing, the Finance Committee has a meeting next week, which will have the school superintendent and yourself. And then March 25th, we have our public hearing scheduled for that day, and the day that we would make a recommendation likely as well.
Okay, and then the select board on March 31st,
31st.
I anticipate we'll start hearing many of the articles from town meeting.
Yep.
Because we have till April 12th
Right, so
to get everything together.
we would then
and
take the
printed.
month of April to go over any additional, I know some people have reached out to me to talk about articles they were gonna put forward, and those would all be things that I would anticipate we would meet in April to take up any additional warrant articles that would have a fiscal impact.
So now that the warrant is closed, what we'll do is send you both bodies a list of the warrant articles.
Perfect.
That way you have them. We're still working on like reports and quantum of vote and all of that. But you can at least get a list of them, and we'll attach any language that is necessary for you to be able to make good
Yeah,
decisions.
so that way we can maybe have one meeting in April, two if needed, where we could go over all of that. We'll have to have the CPC to come in and recommend and talk to us about their projects as well, so that we can, and then we can defer those votes and recommendations until to town meeting, right?
You absolutely can, and I will tell you that there is only 27 articles.
That's great.
Okay.
And we will give you back these books.
I'll take your books and we'll just refill them in new ones and recycle the old paper.
I have all
Yeah,
my
so
notes.
I don't want to make this more complicated for you, but I don't need another book. Like if
Okay.
it's going to be
Yeah, same.
online,
That's fine.
that, so I
Or
don't
I'll
know if
just
anybody
take
else
the
cares.
sheets. I'll just take the sheets.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's fine.
that would be fine.
you can all let us know what's easiest, so, okay.
I like it.
Thank you,
Could we
and thank you to
just-
Dennis, who's
yeah.
really,
Could we just maybe for folks at home too, or refresher for us, the levy capacity? I know there's a lot of talk about, we left the levy capacity on, that we didn't capitalize on the levy capacity. There was always a plan for that,
yeah.
and
It was intentional.
it was intentional, so that the impact, we were sort of saving the residents from these increases, but we had a plan with facilities master plan too.
Yes,
It was
so-
for Kittredge, it was for the fire station, it was for the youth center, for the teacher salaries, right? Some of that was for that. I just
Yes.
think it'd be helpful to, nobody in this room, school committee, and residents, nobody expected guidance to have the cuts that they brought forward. Nobody wanted that or expected that. And I just, the thought that there was no plan or that we were just leaving it on the table, it wasn't there. Those plans were there. They were there for the schools. They were for capital improvements for the schools, for the town. So there's still impacts here that I think we just need to talk about that again.
Yeah, absolutely. So this chart basically shows our excess levy capacity annually. And you can see, so my first budget here is actually fiscal year '21. We left about $123,000 in capacity. Fiscal year '22, we left $57,000 in capacity. Fiscal year '23 is when Amazon started to come on, and we were always to be honest, we tried to capture as much as we could in fiscal year '23 and '24 because they were one-time revenues that Amazon was paying for, and we didn't want to, not collect that. And so that's what we did. We captured that money and we put it into the capital stabilization account, or we paid for one-time items with those. And then you can see it clicks back up in fiscal year '25 because that's when the TIF goes into effect. And basically what the plan was that was laid out under Facilities Master Plan 2 was that we would, every 2 years, bring approximately $1 million of that back into the levy, so that Amazon was paying basically for all of the Facilities Master Plan 2 projects that we had planned. And so that actually included not only the building costs, but also all the operational costs for those buildings as well. So we attempted to do that last year when we brought the $700,000 on for the new teachers. That was Amazon funding, right? We knew that was coming on. It was the first year. There was a certain portion that they were paying, and so we brought that $700,000 in, thinking that we were going to be able to use that to do that. And so the plan always was to bring this $5 million on every 2 years. Now, that being said, plans change, right? And so we make decisions through all of our planning processes, and we try to have sound plans in place. And I say this all the time, we try to make those decisions during when things are kind of the easiest, so that we're not making emotional decisions when things are the hardest. In this instance, circumstances changed, and so we had to pivot. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just taking a different look at how we want to move forward.
And I didn't.
And if I could just add one more thing about the levy capacity that we're talking about, I just want everyone to remember, this is an estimate, right? So this presumes $1,350,000 of new growth. If that doesn't come in at $1,350,000, the new growth, the estimated levy capacity of 1.6 million will be lower than that. Or if state aid were to come in differently, or there's other factors that could impact that. So that's not an actual number, that's an estimated number, and I just want to make sure everyone realizes that it could be lower next year.
Right.
But the new growth is, it's an educated forecast based on historicals, right? You guys
Correct.
do hard work to not pick it out of the air, and we recognize that. But,
That's correct.
but you're right, there is, there's obviously always a little bit of risk whenever everything is a forecast. And I'm just curious, said another way, in terms of the levy capacity, in some ways we're operating our budget as if Amazon was never built, right? And we are, which even that isn't really true because we got benefit from Amazon's personal property, if I remember correctly. So we're operating our forecast as if Amazon was getting built 20% every 2 years or so, to take on that added revenue at that time, essentially pay for projects when you had the money for it. It just looks a little bit different because of the way we chose to do it, right?
Yeah, no, agreed, and I think one of the benefits that I took from that was it would impact taxpayers in the least painful way. And as we saw from one of your other slides, this is going to increase taxes, which again, that's fine. Things change, assumptions are different, and different decisions have to be made. Pivoting is fine. It's just, Laura, to your point, we did have a plan.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not to say I don't want to pivot, and I think we should
No,
pivot,
of
and I think
course,
all those
right.
things. And I think that we're doing the best with the information that we have today. I just, to just reiterate that we did have a plan. Like there was a thoughtful plan moving forward on what we were going to do with that money.
And the goal was for the residents to not pay Amazon's taxes.
That was the plan, right? Was try to keep it so that residents were not paying Amazon's taxes.
100%.
And I think what's kind of important to remember is that our ability to pivot is really important, and we are in a much better place, even though maybe it doesn't feel like it right at this minute, than many other communities who are facing very similar issues and do not have this capacity to pull into. So in some ways, this is a blessing, even if it doesn't feel like it.
It makes it hurt a little bit less.
Yes.
A little bit.
Absolutely.
Well, but if we, at the end of the next 2 cycles, we no longer have that capacity, we'll be on par with those other communities as well if things don't continue to improve.
Yes, if our budget continues to build in a way that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
But I think, just to reiterate your point, it's important for everyone to recognize, and the public to recognize, pivoting, while we all may want to, has impacts, and let's make sure we just understand the impacts, not just to the taxpayers' bill, but also for requiring a debt exclusion
Service,
vote for the Kittredge renovation or rebuild, in 2 years, right? I mean,
Right, that's
we're
going
not gonna have
because
that
of-
money.
Because of the increased capacity that we've taken, the debt
Right.
exclusion for Kittredge is gonna increase.
right.
So that's,
I mean, I think we're all saying here that we think that's the right move to make, but I just want, I think it's worth reiterating as well, what the impact is.
And also string that, while we'd be pivoting on the master plan, we're also not going to full austerity. We're still going to continue to do other projects that we think are important and timely and need to be done as part of this, whether it's the high school field project or, other land acquisition that may come up. We're going to have to still do some of those things with those designated funds. So
Right.
for people to look at and say, well, why are we spending X, Y, Z or, dollars on an item when, we can't meet the initial school request, that they're not always apples to apples.
Yeah, and I think
comparisons.
people kind of lose sight of maybe some things that aren't always fully known, right? So obviously we have capital funding and we have money that's not capital funding, right? And we don't use non-recurring things to pay for recurring things in the budget. But additionally, so just the high school fields project as a for instance, right? It had basically the end of its life, right? And so then we start thinking about liability issues if we have someone fall and hurt their ankle, right? There's so many different things that go into that. If we defer the maintenance, even if we wait one more year, the project becomes so much more expensive. And so those are all things that we weigh, and it's why we do a 5-year capital plan, and it's why we forecast out what our budget's going to look like so that we can make smart decisions about when we do those projects.
And another, we have to upkeep our assets essentially, so.
and
we
just
can serve us for a
touring the
long
school
time.
buildings and knowing what those needs are is so helpful to have that information, and all the work that the school committee and the superintendent have done to gather the information, that we all are able to look at something more accurately moving forward. And then the point of leaving some of that levy capacity, that 1.5 million, is because we know we have contract increases coming next year.
Yes. And it's going
Or
to,
over 2 million.
that's going to very much help with the fiscal year 27 budget.
I'm
Do you have
sorry.
another question?
I just have one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you repeat again on the free cash available after appropriation, why you have nothing in the fire retro? I mean, is that because the contract with the fire department isn't finalized and you don't know what that number is going to be?
So I'm going to do my best to make a very educated guess when we get to town meeting.
Okay.
I don't think we'll have, I know we won't have a decision from the JLMC. Right now, they're about 6 months out. So I will calculate what I think it could possibly be. The danger of going to the Joint Labor Management Commission is that whatever the arbitrator decides is what is moved forward. And both the fire department and the town administration and the select board have, under the statute, a duty to go forward to town meeting and support what that is, right? Now that could, if you kind of watch what's been happening at the JLMC, it could actually be less than what we have previously agreed upon, especially when things like our current financial condition and situation comes into light. It also can be more, right? So you just don't know. So we will calculate what we think that possibly could be and bring it forward.
Sorry, can I just repeat that, make sure I heard that? Because I feel like I see lots of comments on social media about the fact that the fire department doesn't have a contract. So just so I understand, it's gone to a mediation because we couldn't come to an agreement. Now it's up to the mediator to say, this is what it's going to be, and we both are obligated to accept it.
Binding arbitration, and we are obligated
And-
to go to town meeting and support it. Yes.
Okay, and when do we expect that process to be done? Like after town meeting,
In the
you're
summer.
saying? Wow, okay.
6 months, she said.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to have this fire retro article, because the hope was that we would be done by June 30th and we could just use the money we have. Unfortunately, we know that's likely not going to be the case. And so I don't want to end up in a situation where I'm saying to you, I need the finance committee reserve for
Right.
fire retro.
Yeah,
So we
okay.
wanted to be proactive and get something on there. It's a placeholder right now, but we'll continue to kind of flesh out what that possibly could be. But it is a binding arbitration.
Okay,
And
thank you.
So both, what is helpful with the binding arbitration is that both parties are only allowed to bring 5 items. So we can calculate what the costs of the 5 items
Right. Okay.
is. It really limits, and every other tentative agreement you already had is no longer a tentative agreement.
Okay.
5 each or
5 each.
In financials automatically, one of them, correct?
And the COLA is automatically one of them. Other financial articles can be separate.
Okay.
Okay, for real this time, I think
Sorry.
we're done.
Hold on. No, I'm just kidding.
Any other questions? We're good? We're good as well.
Okay. All right, so, Mr. Select Board Chair, we still have a couple items, I think, on our agenda. I don't know if you do. You're certainly,
We have minutes to approve, I know that.
so we, as do we, and we also have a public comment.
Which I think
period.
would like to sit here for as well, so,
Okay, so you want to remain in session?
at your pleasure, yeah.
Well, okay, well,
Yes.
we're going to, whether you
Yes,
do or not.
we will as well, yes.
Okay. All right, so then, the next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes for our March 5th, 2025 meeting. Those minutes were in everybody's packet. I'm going to assume you all read them diligently with a red pen and a black pen and crossed everything out that you didn't like. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
You're moving approval?
I'm moving approval.
That's
the
what I
minutes
thought
of
I
March 5.
Thank you, Chris.
2025.
Do I have a
As
second?
Second.
Second by Keith. All those, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those minutes are approved.
If you would mind.
Yes.
Has everyone had a chance to review our minutes as well? If there's any comments, I'll take a motion.
I move approval. A second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Our minutes are approved. Back
Okay.
to you.
Well, then, the next item on our agenda is public comment. So if we have anybody here who would like to make a public comment,
We have to close, but we can stay in 10. Okay.
that's what I was trying to get at.
Well, someone just got to tell me. These dual meetings get a little
I was trying to
confusing.
hint it, I was trying to get you there.
All right, wrapping up our meeting. Our next meeting date, as the town manager mentioned, is Monday, March 31st, back in the select board meeting room at 7 p.m. And then I will take a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are audience members.
Oh,
We'll get in line for public
thought I
comment.
could vote on that one too. Okay, the next item on the Finance Committee's agenda, oh, by the way, thank you all very much for, I think that was very efficient and actually brought out a lot of good discussion points, meeting jointly, so thank you. Is public comment. So if anyone in the audience has a comment that they would like to make, you're more than welcome to come up to the microphone, state your name, address, and give us your comment. And I see everybody shaking their heads. Okay, well then we will close the public comment period. And our next meeting date is Tuesday, March 18th, 7 p.m. in the School Administration Building. Be there or be square. And we will also have our town manager with us, as well as our superintendent and probably our director of finance too, although he's acting cool and not paying attention. Just kidding, I'm just kidding.
It's on a roll today.
No, seriously.
Within earshot.
I might hit the laugh factory after this.
Where's your car parked?
All right, so the next item on our agenda is adjournment, so if anybody would have a motion.
I move we adjourn.
Regina moves we adjourn. Seconded by Eva. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And no opposed? Okay, at 8:51, we are adjourned. Thank you.